Hi there, and welcome to The InEVitable. This is the new podcast from MotorTrend, where we are talking about the future of the car, or as he says, of mobility. We're talking about EVs. We're talking about infrastructure, cars that don't have steering wheels, everything. Where are we going, and how are we going to get there? I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Ed Lowe, and
Hello.
Today we have an incredible guest.
Incredible.
One I'm maybe the most excited about so far, because this guy is the head of – first of all, I love car design. Second of all, he's the head of design for Lucid Motors, who has maybe the most futuristic vehicle out there right now. And
Certainly the biggest range, the most exciting vehicle currently, because it's our car of the year for 2022.
That's right. But if we're talking about what's inevitable, cars like this is really kind of at the forefront. And Derek Jenkins is going to be our guest, and I'm excited to talk to him. But Ed, my question for you, and let's give a design question. Are EVs cool enough looking yet? In other words, right, you don't have an engine there.
Right.
You don't have a gas tank.
Right.
You got some batteries on the floor, so they're going to be maybe a little taller than like a Lamborghini, but you don't have the constraints you used to have. Yeah, you got safety, but like, do we like how EVs look yet? Are they going to get better?
I think the operative word you said is cool enough.
Cool
enough. Now, I will grant you that they are very cool. You and I have talked a lot about Model S and that vehicle. Just, again, our previous car of the year winner. I think the design on that vehicle still holds up really, really well.
It is, but it's conventional. If you look at the hips and stuff, and the side and the rear,
it's a big body sedan, but it's a hatchback, and I give them a lot of credit. And they smoothed out the arrow in the nose, so they went away from that fake grille to just that little slit up front. The thing I know there are early adopters and folks out there that are bored with it, and they've moved on. They got a Taycan.
But people are bored with the Ford Lightning already, and it hasn't come out yet.
Right.
You got to understand the internet.
Right.
Don't listen to the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a classically good-looking vehicle. People always say, that was a great-looking vehicle. Is it cool enough? Is it futuristic enough? And I will say no. I don't think we're quite there yet, and I don't think we will get there for a long time. I have a theory that I want to bounce off of our guest about why that is. But you can say every car out on the road looks very traditional because I'll give you a good example. Every time a concept car comes out and they've gotten rid of the side mirrors and they put these cool they put little cameras that are pointing back, and everyone's like, "Well, that's right, that's going to happen." I'm like, "That's not happening. It's not happening because the FMVSS, whichever number it is that governs side mirrors, has yet to be changed to allow cameras and a screen inside in the place of a simple piece of glass or plastic."
In the U.S., remember, the U.S. is 330 million people. There's 7 some odd billion in the rest of the world that they got no laws.
Well, no, I mean, I think Europe still has it okay.
No, because and also like the Aston Martin Valkyrie has no mirrors, and they're selling them in the U.S. and they're selling them without mirrors in the U.S. And I think
I don't believe. Is there a volume? There must be a low.
Could be a volume thing, but I think there's a couple German. I feel like there's a couple German cars coming out that are not going to have mirrors. And just remember, that's part of the complexity of building cars. Is one set of laws govern the U.S., one set of laws govern the EU. China has radically different, not necessarily laws, but tax laws. And then the rest of the world has nothing.
You're obliterating my point, though.
I like to obliterate your points. Good point.
The point was that there are but you just said it. There are regulations everywhere. There's a lot of safety stuff that currently constrains vehicle design. Like if you kind of squint your eyes and look at vehicles from from currently to the 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the 90s, the 80s, you'll notice that things seem to have gotten like bigger, puffier, if you will. If you just sit in an old car, and I got this Land Cruiser, and I sit in it, and the door shuts right here, and it's got a little door handle, and then
your shoulder touches the door.
Right.
Yeah, that's very unsafe, by the way.
It's literally like this much metal and plastic.
Or you ever driven an old Defender where your shoulder really has to be outside the vehicle. You got to have the window down.
Right.
And luckily, the metal is like at your hip. It's all glass.
In my Porsche, I can touch the windshield literally,
but with
this.
Your thumb on the steering wheel,
right.
You can put your pinky on. Yeah.
And all that is not possible because of crash safety these days. So you have to, I think we annihilated the last generation Explorer when we first got into it because like you were sitting so inboard.
Well, it was also lopsided. There's a lot of reasons for that.
But that gives it apparently a pretty good side impact car safety rating.
Well, it also it's another way though. You have a 2-row vehicle, you turn into a 3-row, and you just widen it, and suddenly your interior volume is competitive with everyone else. Right. But anyways, that's. Yeah.
But yeah, so
that's not inevitable.
Our vehicles, our EVs, cool. They are cool looking. We talked a lot about the Hyundai Ioniq, which looks super cool.
The Ioniq 5.
Ioniq 5, yep.
Yeah.
And,
unlike the Ioniq. The Ioniq is not super cool.
Ioniq 5.
5 is super cool.
Very cool. Hides its size and mass really well, but also has that cool kind of cyberpunk Blade Runner aesthetic going on.
I'm going to get you on record, though. The Lucid Air, what do you think?
So I think it's a striking looking vehicle. Do I think it's classically good looking? No, but I think that's kind of the point. I think it looks great in the gold color.
Have you seen?
But especially at night, coming and going. And I think I know this is something that a lot of designers focus on. Is that lighting signature, and as Tom Gay would say, it's gesture and how it goes down the road.
Right.
And I think and I know because I've been with people as they see one coming down the road, they go, "What is that?"
Yeah.
And mission accomplished.
And you know who else is doing that particularly well? Genesis.
Yes.
Genesis with their two-stripe design, because they get it from all 4 angles.
Yes.
If you see it coming, if you're like, if you see the side, you're like, oh, that's a Genesis. Oh, that's a Genesis from the rear or from the front.
Front three-quarter.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. And that has design. A very clean, not overstyled, not too ostentatious, very clean. A lot of focus on surfacing, and I think getting all the lines to work harmoniously with each other. But no, I haven't seen an EV even sketched yet that looks like super wild and super futuristic, like coming at you from an angle that hasn't been sort of seen before.
I will end with this then. Do we need super wild? In other words, like car design is actually pretty good right now. Cars are pretty safe right now. Do we need to be super wild, or are we just asking for that because we don't have it?
Yeah, it goes back to sort of like there's no new themes in science fiction movies. They're all kind of the same,
Right.
Like I would love for something to kind of melt my brain, blow me out of the water.
Right.
Probably the last vehicle I got into that was so fundamentally different, and this I will get annihilated for saying this, was I did.
Don't say the Sienna.
No. 2015, I got a ride in the Google car.
Oh, right.
The little pod,
Yeah.
And that was like not very well finished. It was a prototype, but
sure.
No steering wheel.
Right.
You sit on a bench. It's a little pod. It looks crazy dorky, but it was intentional. It was done with the intention being it's friendly. The whole front panel of that vehicle was soft in case it did hit somebody or something.
Right.
Like it was designed because the idea of a self-driving car is so scary. It was designed to be the opposite, to be friendly and inviting. And, it ultimately went nowhere as an evolutionary dead end.
Yeah.
But
interesting exercise.
Yeah, versus other autonomous vehicles, which were like built off of Chrysler Pacificas or Lexus RXs, where you're like, wow, this is like the same car I'm used to with a bunch of gear on the roof or hanging off the bumpers.
So the last car for me that blew my mind, and I remember very well when it happened, but was the Aston Martin Valkyrie. Is such a radical departure in the way cars look, and it's got so much downforce that they tuned up the downforce all the way. In the wind tunnel, it pops the tires. It's literally over 2 tons of downforce.
It does look like an F1 car upside down.
Yeah, and it's all so all the arrows like underneath. It's these Venturi tunnels underneath the thing. Good tying to Lucid because it's got Venturi tunnels up front. But that thing is just radical in the proper sense of the word.
Sure.
And I'm stoked for that. But let's get Derek Jenkins in here. He's just arrived, and let's ask him about the future of the car.
Let's do it. Welcome, Derek. So, Derek Jenkins, so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. Derek Jenkins, Senior Vice President of Design and Brand for Lucid Motors. Lucid, as you know, their Lucid Air is MotorTrend's 2022 Car of the Year. That's your baby. So glad you graced us with your time. I know you're super busy. Always got stuff going on. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, man. Super pleased to be here. This is exciting.
I'm glad to have you here for a very, very selfish reason. So, design. You're the VP of Design and Brand. When I hear someone is the vice president of brand, that means you deal with a lot of signage, fonts, logos. What do you think of this InEVitable?
Oh, you love it! Come on, you love it. First of all, for context, Johnny hates the name.
It's terrible.
He hated it from the beginning.
Puns.
I think this is the ultimate pun because I can say things like, "Hey, welcome to the InEVitable podcast from MotorTrend," right? Or check out our InEVitable newsletter, right?
Yeah, right.
It never gets old.
It's old.
I'm going to make you so sick of this by the end of this. But yes, look, I don't.
You don't. By the way, you don't have to answer this.
Well,
question.
I mean, it is a cheeky dual purpose kind of name.
Yes, I like
I think it seems intentional. So
Yes.
I like the 80s like techie font.
There you
Well, I wasn't even talking about the font. I just meant
Okay,
the font.
okay.
The font itself is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I was shocked by how much I like the font.
It's very 2001, right? It's like the
I think
size
it's
of
earlier than that. Even it's got like
the movie. I mean, like
Space Odyssey.
yes,
yeah,
exactly. Like it looks like it could be on the side of like a spaceship,
Right.
Like,
yeah. It's got that like early '70s future.
Yes.
vibe to
When
it.
you're walking down to get into Space Mountain into the control
Exactly.
room, that's the
Ex-
font.
that is
Yes,
the font.
This is what
Very
the
good.
Disney future. What do they call them?
Futurama.
Imagineers.
Yeah, Imagineers,
Imagineers.
yeah.
would come up
Well,
with-
look, that's a great segue actually, because let's talk a little bit about your life pre-Lucid. And I did.
Ed compiles dossiers. Like,
I
you
did
remember the Steele dossier on Trump? Like they got nothing on what Ed's up to.
No. I do a little Googling and I read a bunch of articles on you. We met actually a while back. I
a few
think
times.
you were. I think you were at VW actually when I first met you.
Probably,
before
yeah.
you went to Mazda. But even before that, I actually didn't know this about you personally. Like you grew up as a surfer. Like you were.
I was just a surf rat.
Still do.
I still do. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
all right.
Not as much as I'd
Where'd
like.
you grow up?
I grew up in Huntington Beach,
Okay.
the south end
Nice.
of Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
Was
Okay.
like kind of like just the state beaches right there, and
Right.
I'd ride my bike, and go
Shortboard,
surfing every day.
longboard.
I started as shortboarding.
Okay.
And then now, when you're older, you inevitably
Inevitably.
move towards.
See
how many times I can get that
exactly.
in today.
I love it.
Okay, I'm gonna bookmark this because I have a lot of questions about not specifically surfing, but some
that's
California.
great. Well, hey, look,
questions.
I'm still. I
Ed loves surfing.
I love surfing. I actually wore this today because I was like, I want to talk about surfing. I'm bring back like a surfer vibe. My favorite surfer sweater, like whatever. It's weird that you think that because I'm still trying to make it on a shortboard. I started on a longboard. Now I'm trying to go in reverse.
I mean, now there are all these hybrid boards, these mid-level boards, which are like anywhere from like 7.5
Yeah.
up to about 8.5.
they call it mid-length crisis.
Exactly.
apparently.
They're
Mid-length
perfect
crisis.
because you can get all the maneuverability. They're
Yep.
super fast. You catch waves easy. And, you're not bogged down as much with the longboard, but you're not struggling to catch waves.
Right.
That's the part that's tough. And especially out in Malibu, it's a busy lineup. And you get your butt kicked all the time
Sure.
if you're not, like, paddling in fast enough.
Nice. Okay, that's funny. Oh man, I wish I'd known because we actually pre-pandemic, before everything went to lockdown, we had a guy at work has like access to the secret beaches up in Malibu, and we used to go out kind of county line, sort of just south of that.
Yeah, just south of there.
Amazing. Well, let's get back into it. So, because I understand some of you've at various points infused surf culture into the vehicle design, but
hang on. Let's get that resume going though. So, was Volkswagen your first?
Audi.
Yeah, it was Audi, but Volkswagen Group. So,
Actually, going back, were you in Art Center?
Yes.
I was Art Center. I did an
Transportation major?
internship with Porsche. I did an internship with Volkswagen. While at the Volkswagen internship, met Jay Mays and Freeman Thomas.
Oh, they're pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So you may have heard of them.
Yeah, once or twice. Yeah.
And
But for people who are listening who haven't heard of Jay Mays and Freeman Thomas, I mean, Jay Mays was like the guru of Ford design,
Yep.
especially back in the premier automotive group glory days.
Also,
That's
is he retro? Was he like the retro future?
Retrofuturism was
Yes,
that.
was
Well,
his
I
big
mean,
thing.
I don't know.
Among
that,
many.
I feel like Jay has a lot more to his
Sure.
career besides that, but definitely that was.
There are
a big
things
one.
you're known for.
Yeah, for sure.
And Freeman Thomas, you can probably give a better biography than I can.
Freeman Thomas started his career at Porsche.
Yeah.
It was instrumental at VW. Big one is the new Beetle.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Audi TT.
Yeah, TT was what I was going to say.
Yeah, went on to Chrysler 300 and
Right.
then did a whole bunch of projects at Ford. So he's just been super influential. I both consider them both my top mentors in this business.
Pretty good mentors. And also Freeman has like one of the greatest Porsche 356s I've ever seen. That thing is just beyond love.
Yeah,
it's
and
black
just so
and
knowledgeable about the specifically Porsche product, but anything VW Group and then even German for that matter. He's pretty intense like that, but it's part of his kind of secret to being a great designer.
What era were you at Audi?
So that was like 1994 through to 2000, and then at that point I changed over to Volkswagen.
Okay, so Derek
that's
apparently
some big stuff.
has the secret to the Fountain of Youth. Because you look at him and you're like, "There's no way this guy has been in the industry since the early."
I had
early
hair
90s.
then.
No, I'm serious. Like you never age. Like,
that was an interesting time because Audi was at a pretty low point.
Yeah,
coming off the '80s, late '80s. You know that story.
Oh, sure.
And there were really
inevitable acceleration. Sorry,
they had just come out with the A4 when I joined, and that was this kind of like perpetual improvement and their aspiration to really take on BMW, Mercedes on an equal playing field.
And you were in that, sorry, Johnny, you were involved in that because you were working on the iconic A8, right? That was
that was D3 A8.
D3, so that's
third generation.
Phaeton,
exactly.
Bentley.
That
That's
same
the
era.
Piek era.
Yeah,
that's
because
amazing. What an amazing era.
They had the Audi V8 in the late '80s, early '90s, and then
the 4.2
and the D2, which was this more kind of it's fairly. I don't know what you would call it, just very clean, but not that expressive of a vehicle.
Right,
and
didn't scream Audi from
and of
corner,
course the S-Class and 7 Series continued to be the staple in that segment, so we just felt like we had to really push that car to be more sporty and more expressive. And simultaneously the TT was going on and that generation A6, so there was a real push at that point for expressive design.
That was so. That was after your internships. That was 2000 early.
Well, when I first moved there, that was '94. I went to Ingolstadt and we started on first the Audi A2, if you know that vehicle.
Sure. Oh, very funky vehicle.
Yes, and
aluminum.
A boot camp for aerodynamics and efficient design execution, and then that followed on into the AA, which is more like '95. Development time frame, 95, 96. Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. Cool. I would have to think that what a great time to be, what a great time and place to be designing, right? Like Audi in particular. One of my first brushes with the brand, because I spent my formative years doing tuner car stuff, and then I got to go on the first press trip. When I was like, "What is this? This is amazing!" They buy dinner. This is wild. But then going and doing factory tours or I remember doing a thing with Audi where they showed me all the stuff that's coming to the future, and they showed lightweight, the focus on removing mass, LEDs. LEDs will be in car headlights, and they actually gave us one. It was super bright. And it was crazy. It was hooked up to a battery.
That, yeah.
And they were so proud of the LED daytime running lights.
Oh my God! They showed us touchscreen. For Chinese character input, and this was like in mid 2000, right? It was like you could do all this stuff, and I was like, some of this stuff is totally horrible. This is not coming.
Yeah.
And then they delivered on every single one, and I was like, this is hardcore. For a while, because they were like the only guys out there with LED lights.
So I'm noticing something here though. So Audi, Volkswagen back then, Mazda to Lucid. You've kind of only worked at companies led around by engineers.
Predominantly, or at least that had a strong passion towards engineering. Yeah.
Right, but like Audi was, it was Piek, being the Grand Maestro, but also Hackenberg, these guys were, it was not bean counters that were leading the charge.
And it wasn't excessive marketing input either. It was really driving innovation, driving technology, and coupled with design.
And now at Lucid, real quick, just to make the point, but Peter is not only the CEO, but he's the CTO. He's still the chief technical officer.
That's right. Very hands-on.
That's got an interesting career.
And he's from Lotus, and he's done all.
No. But I'm saying it's an interesting career arc because a lot of designers get brutalized by that looks nice. Cut $20,000 out of everything.
Right. Yeah, and
just because we don't care about the actual car, we just want to save some money.
Yeah, and I think it's important that relationship between design and engineering. It's that's the difference between just styling a piece of vehicle architecture and actually designing something and working it out and getting the most out of it, because it's a nuanced interaction between design and engineering that determines if it's going to really be a success.
And you did the Mazda, back to Mazda for a second, you did the the ND Mazda, right? The fourth gen, and that was huge engineering.
Okay, let's be mindful of our audience.
Fourth generation Mazda Miata.
Okay.
So that was huge engineering lift, because for the first time maybe in like history, a car got much smaller and lighter.
Yeah, that was massive, and to give as much credit to my Japanese colleagues as well. I mean, it was really a collaborative effort of the design team in Irvine, as well as the design team in Hiroshima, and of course the lead engineers. They're just obsessed with weight reduction, and keeping things compact and staying true to the essence of kind of a bare bones roadster experience.
One horse, one rider, right?
That was the
catchphrase. Jinbai
Itai.
Yeah.
Jinbai Itai,
which actually translates almost directly to Chinese as well. So, which is weird. Can you answer me this, because you said it, and this recalls something when I went to go visit Mazda in Hiroshima once. We saw the design studio, and they said they were very proud of their clay modelers.
Yes,
and they showed us all these crazy tools that they use, including I was looking at this rolling cart, and it had this cheese grater on it, and I was like, "Hey man, that's one you get at IKEA." And they're like, "Oh yeah, dude. For in the auto business, I forget the name of it. This IKEA cheese grater is like legendary for taking off layers of clay,
but and just chunks,
right?
Yeah.
But what they said is their clay modelers are so good, they are coveted throughout the industry. They're regularly hired away.
Absolutely,
is that true?
Yeah, I mean, you know what it is? It's a fundamental approach that they take, and this was, you work for a certain amount of years in design, and you think you've learned most of the approach to design. And at Volkswagen Group, Audi Group, it's like proportion and line and getting that balance right, and it's very this Teutonic approach to design. Get that first, and the sculpting kind of falls into place between the lines and to enhance the proportions.
The art follows the technology.
Yeah, at Mazda it was like, let's get the sculptural quality of the car, meaning like what do the surfaces look like? Don't worry about the lines, don't worry as much about the proportions, get the sculpture right. So they would do these really advanced kind of free-form sculptures that don't even necessarily look like a vehicle. They're just like speed forms, right?
No, I got a letter opener from Mazda one time that was wacky looking, but it was really cool.
And it was such a fascinating thing, because they put the gesture and the essence of kind of, it sounds kind of ethereal, but of movement. Mm-hmm. They would put that first and then hone everything else in after that. Okay. So it was really fascinating to learn that process. And
literally
as a result,
function follows form, right?
To some extent. Yeah. And as a result, the sculptors that they train over time stay there for like most of their career, if not their entire career, and they're just very artistic and nuanced with how they sculpt clay.
Interesting. So
that's very cool.
So 8 years at Audi first, then 9 years at VW, and then to Mazda for I think roughly around 4 or 5 years.
I was 6 years at Mazda.
6 years at Mazda, head of design for North America.
That's correct. Yeah.
M&AO, Mazda North American Operations. Their Shinari concept, which led to Mazda 6. Which was I had a long-term Mazda 6. I loved it. It had a manual.
That was
super
amazing.
light.
That was when that came out, man. That car was hot stuff.
Mazda 3, and then I think the current CX-9.
That's right. CX-9 was almost entirely done in Irvine. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's so weird because we forget, because we talk to designers about the product that as it rolls out, and.
Right, they were done with it 4 years.
They were done with it 3-4 years ago, and they got to kind of go back in their heads and be like, "What was I doing right there?"
Yeah, totally. I actually left the company before the car hit the road, which was kind of a drag,
right?
But
you celebrated, from a different company. So
but let's talk Lucid.
Yeah. So look, when you joined, it wasn't even Lucid; it was still Ativa, right?
Yeah.
And the claim to fame there was Formula E batteries.
Not even that hadn't transpired yet. It was batteries for hybrid buses, mostly in China.
Oh,
so what was the pitch? What got you away from Mazda?
What the hell were you going to do there?
I think it was a bit of serendipity. I was at a point where I was like, okay, I felt like, okay, a lot's coming. You can feel it. You can even. This was 2015, and I'd already watched kind of the success and rise of Tesla. Good friends with many folks that work there, and super impressed and blown away by.
Because Franz was Mazda. You were probably at
You-
Mazda.
I took his old job.
You took his job. Right?
yeah,
So
which
did you
is-
work on a? No.
That's pretty amazing. Real quick, little Mazda, who has like less than 1% of the market share, like has produced the two guys. I mean, it's an amazing.
It's yeah, and I
crazy.
went to school with Franz. We sat next to each other at Volkswagen at the studio when it used to be in Simi Valley.
Right.
We worked on the new Beetle together with Freeman. I mean, it's super tied together, and we're still good friends. And so to watch all that
Hey,
transpire,
he was in Malibu too, I think.
and he lives down the street.
Yes,
Yes.
interesting. Very cool.
And so it was. I think that I was itching to kind of get on to something that was like a little bit more innovative, future facing, really get deeper into technology and try to pivot that. And so Ativa had reached out to me at the time, had dinner with Peter, and we really hit it off. Just we know a lot of the same people.
Right.
Super impressed with his experience at Tesla and his oversight and really kind of helping to bring Model S to the level that it was at. I mean, he really, had such an instrumental hand in that program. And I think that I felt like, well, if anybody has a shot at this, Peter would. And, of course, I already met a lot of the people that he was surrounding himself with. But probably the number one thing was just kind of this idea that again, like I talked about earlier, the synergy between design and engineering. Just, I didn't want to just style a car. I wanted to be part of something more, and then take that a step further. This idea of really building a brand, an entity, and really determining who our customer is, what do we want to achieve. Really building that story out together with Peter was just too attractive to pass on.
Right.
And how early in the overtures to you did they disclose their product, the very first vehicle, what the plan was? Did you know immediately, we're going to build a big luxurious sedan?
Or it was the buses for Shanghai.
Yeah.
I think it was the fundamental thing that was in place was that Peter wanted to do another sedan.
Okay.
And that he felt like there's another big step that can be made beyond what Model S achieved. Right. That was probably the number one thing in place. That's not to say we didn't spend several months having deep debate about, should it be an SUV? Should it be a pickup truck? We had that discussion.
Right.
Okay.
This is before we said we're making a luxury sedan. It was just we're going to do a sedan. The term luxury wasn't even in the mix yet.
Okay.
So then we said, okay, if we're going to – once it was decided we're going to do a sedan for all the reasons we cited, then we were like, okay, what's the positioning? Who's the customer? What's going to differentiate us? Who's our competition? And that's where we said, that it makes the most sense to go after a luxury position.
Right. So then I get it. Okay, so you were super attractive to Peter and the team over there because no matter where you went, you'd been at luxury brands, you'd been at sort of more of a mass market consumer brand, you'd done SUVs, you'd done a 3-row SUV, you'd done a little sports car, but now seeing, it's very easy for me to say, oh man, Peter went after you because you were involved with that A8, right? Like there's a big body, aluminum intensive luxury brand, their flagship sedan, and look at where we are now with the Lucid Air, right? But I think it's a little more nuanced than that.
I think it is. I think it's more about kind of the approach towards things, and that and I think we like similar cars. He likes E-types and 911s and, just a little bit more sculpted aesthetic. He likes technology and kind of how to blend that kind of, we call it heart and mind of those two worlds and not get caught up in overtly trendy styling or, on the other hand, be so subtle and so restricted and conventional that people don't take notice. Finding that sweet spot is obviously a really difficult thing to do.
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so now we've arrived at this moment where, again, congratulations, what an achievement. And there's a fair amount of patting ourselves on the back because
we weren't even there. We weren't there.
Well,
the two of us didn't give the award.
Right. Right. We have a number of judges for Car of the Year. My team, our colleagues were the guys selecting it. But what I was saying is we're very proud of car of the year. It's been out since we've given it since 1949. We think unabashedly that we have the most rigorous program out there. We do, we ensure everybody who's voting on the car gets to drive the car. That is a fundamental point that's missed by some of these other awards. Maybe I don't know. Speak about
said enough, Ed. You said enough.
Yeah, but we test the vehicles, instrumented testing.
We beat the hell out of them too. We don't just go on a little Sunday drive.
Right, it's ours. It's.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, like if you think about what we do for our of the year programs, car, truck, SUV, and this new one we're doing, performance vehicle of the year, it's insane. Like you couldn't as a startup do this. You couldn't call up every manufacturer and say, "Hey guys, at your own cost, please send us every model year vehicle that's brand new or
really updated,
significantly updated. Send it to this proving ground. By the way, your competitor's proving ground. We'll sign stuff, but send it over here. Leave it for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
we're gonna drive them. We're gonna test them. We're gonna pick a winner.
They're probably coming back in one piece, but maybe not.
Well, no, we don't actively try to.
No. But I mean, we were abusive. I mean,
we're not abusive. We test things thoroughly.
Proving ground.
We test things thoroughly.
Okay. This is the corporate face over here.
Right. And
we really drive them.
Your chances of winning are dependent on how many people send a vehicle, and like everybody does, because we've been doing this for so long, and we're like a line item in a lot of car companies' budgets, apparently. Anyways, we're very proud of this, and then to put a cherry on top, this is Lucid Motors' first vehicle, first product. And congratulations, you're the winner. Long intro to. How'd that go? What's changed for you? Like anything?
What was that like?
What was the internal response? What was the external of you guys? Has it been? Hopefully, it's been beneficial and helpful, or as much as we can be. But
I mean, Peter seemed happy.
Peter seemed very happy.
No, I mean, this was obviously a massive ambition. Knowing the timing of the judging and kind of where we were at with finishing of the car. And the pre-production of the car and then the final deliveries of the car. It was just a huge priority for us because we felt like, I think we felt like the car's pretty awesome, but you just don't know. Don't really know.
The other thing is there's a lot of other really good cars. That's it's not just like
that's the thing.
You get it built and you win. It's like that new. I was just telling your PR guy Dave, like that Civic is tremendously good.
Yeah.
Like to defeat that takes a hell of a car.
Yeah,
like
Honda
for knows what they're doing.
Right, entirely different reasons.
Entirely different reason.
That's a great. That's something we talked about with Peter. Like. Again, you guys are first out with your first product. It's so complicated. Supercomputer on wheels. It's got all this new technology, and the finalists that you're up against. This is what 12th generation Civic.
11th, I think.
11th or 12th.
Whatever. What's the difference?
I think it's 12th,
they know what they're doing.
The difference?
But yeah,
what's the difference?
And one of the best-selling vehicles globally.
And Honda's pretty good.
Honda's the number one engine manufacturer in the world. Like holy moly!
Yeah.
And and this is what I think blows people's minds who don't dig deep into the comparison. The award program. It's not a comparison test. We're not actually comparing
the Lucid's quicker.
Not apples to apples.
And Honda's cheaper. We know all that.
It's against our criteria, and again against every part of the criteria, engineering, design. Like you guys nailed it. So let me.
No, let me just say that I mean for all of us on the team, it was just like hugely validating and a huge source of pride for me personally. Probably one of, if not the proudest moment.
Yes.
Just
I love
because
hearing that.
Knowing if you just knowing what it took to get here.
Sure.
It's just been a crazy
I've heard
journey.
Little bits and pieces of the dark days in 2017.
You don't get through something like that without just kind of I don't want to say blind faith, but it's almost just like this never say die belief that you can pull this off because of the people that you're working with, just going. And to get to this point and get up against that competition was just hugely validating. It also makes a big difference for us, just validating us as a new player, that everybody's like, oh, wow, MotorTrend believes that about that. They think that about the car. That is hugely validating for us and very helpful for us to transition and be taken more serious and ultimately get more people in the car and move on to the next project.
Right.
Right.
So let's go back to let's talk about the Air, the Lucid Air. So It's different than a lot of cars for a lot of reasons. But one thing Lucid's done is the miniaturization of everything. Except for the batteries; those are sadly kind of a fixed technology. But you had all this much more space to work with, and things were just different. So what was your design goals? Starting out, like, or another way to put it is, like, does the finished product look like what you initially thought it might look like?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting discussion because really early on, when I got there, we had, like I was saying, we had to kind of establish some kind of brand thinking and what we wanted to do, who we were going after. How did we see ourselves positioned in the world? Peter had very clear views on how we wanted to handle this space concept, where we're really optimizing the cabin of the car, wheelbase of the car, cargo areas around the components, miniaturizing things down. So that already alters kind of the skeleton of the vehicle, right? Right. It's going to have a certain length in order to have that much space. We need to have a certain height and width to be optimized for that, for aerodynamics. So there's already kind of a template forming in the early days. But then it was like, okay, how do we really want this to look? Because you could still take that template and make something somewhat classic out of it. And
sure.
Somewhat, we could have done an electric Bentley out of that, I think,
Yeah. But you guys had a crazy aero goal.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Your drag coefficient is like 0.2, lowest in history, as far as I know.
Yeah. And there might be a few counts still left in that, and we're still working on that. But yeah, I mean, with that goal, that drives a certain aesthetic, but you have to be careful because, I think from day one we were like, okay, we want this thing to be future-facing, but we're not doing Blade Runner here. We're not trying to scare people. I felt like
Interesting.
I didn't want to have customers that are in internal combustion luxury vehicles to have to justify to their neighbor why'd you get that?
Right.
It should be something that still like has an innate appeal to a large audience. I just didn't feel like we needed massive controversy in the design, that we should balance kind of something futuristic, but that has an innate elegance to it as well. And so that became a bit of a filter that we were using all the way through.
Were there things you were looking at, and I say this for people listening, like, I remember talking to some of the Jaguar team behind the XJ, the last XJ, and they said, well, we knew it was going to be big, but we wanted it to be big and athletic. So what's big and athletic? Well, like America's Cup yacht, that's pretty big and pretty athletic. Right. So that's what we looked at.
Yeah.
Did you have any like objects or animals or anything?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we talked a lot about aircraft. So we had early in the project, we did this thing where we went to kind of pre-war aircraft, post-war aircraft, kind of current.
Honestly, it's funny you say that. I remember that one time I looked at it and I'm like, that's a seaplane. I'm seeing like the Boeing, the Cutter or Clipper or whatever it's called.
Right,
just the massive seaplane.
A bit of that kind of like 50s, 60s era kind of aesthetic, the materiality components on the exterior, just the volumes of the surfaces that it's not about a front, top, side, rear. It's got a continuity to it throughout the vehicle. Yeah.
And that, by the way, I think that also makes it. You got to see it in person. 2D changes the look of your car, and I've seen this a lot where I post a picture and everyone will say, "Ugh," and then they'll say, "Oh, I saw one driving and it looked a lot better."
Yeah, it's hard to really represent in still photography. It does better in video, and I just think it's one of those things. It's often the case with cars. You got to really see it in person or drive next to it to fully appreciate it. But that kind of aircraft seamlessness quality was something that we really strive for. And I also felt like this was a little bit of an opportunity to kind of start a new chapter with electric cars. If you look at the last 10, 15 years of car design, where we're getting bigger grills, more holes, bigger slots, more vents, more lines, complexity, just extreme expression in the face of the cars.
Right. Which you helped to perpetrate at Audi.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fair enough.
Making up for your sins.
And I'm not even denouncing that. I'm just saying that was the clear path for the last, if we go from like the 80s where things were very graphic and just linear.
Right.
And then we got a lot more expressive through the 90s and early 2000s. And so much of that was celebrating internal combustion, big openings, big grills.
Yeah, 3 grills.
Big exhaust
Well,
pipes.
can I ask you though? So how much of that is because I feel like as an engineer would make the claim like, well, yeah, in the '80s, like a car that had 300 horsepower was like you'd lose your mind. And now we've talked about how we're like this golden age of horsepower, and we got trucks that are like 450, 500 horsepower, let alone what the sports cars are doing, and to do that, you need massive cooling.
Yep.
You need huge holes up front. Or are you saying, that's actually a little bit that's theater?
Well,
you don't need a giant double kidney grill that goes to the all the way from the top of the hood to the bottom. You don't need something like that.
If you go look at a high-powered, just pick a vehicle, or even some of the low-powered vehicles, you'll find that about 40 to 50% of the blackout openings are unused.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's design.
Again, is that good design?
Right.
Is that just expressive design? I'm not here to say. I just think that there's certain companies that don't play those games. They just focus on a really honest design, that really does what it's meant to do. And most of the great designs throughout history, I felt, really, even the ones that are really overstyled, but still have an honesty to certain aspects. And I just felt like we wanted to start out that way.
Interesting. And I also think though, it's just car fashion or fashion is cyclical, right? I mean, I remember the Infiniti Q45 when it came out, no grill. Right, and then you look at I know it's a different company, but like Lexus, I was looking at GX the other day. We were doing a video on it's nothing but a grill.
Right,
there's a grill and headlights. There's no metal at all.
Yeah.
And it's just nuts. I think it's inevitable. That you got to bounce back to what the Air looks like, and it's a very minimal grill.
Yeah.
Now you guys have very cool technology behind that, the Vortex generator that is more efficient on the radiators and all that, but it's a very small opening.
Sure. Yeah, I actually want to dive in on that and utilize Derek's again for him, and we feel like Air is something he designed or finished the clays probably a few years ago, a year ago, 2 years, whatever. I don't know how quickly Lucid's working versus a traditional car company, but you're on to other stuff. You're thinking about the future. You're hopefully trying to live in that future. And we talk about this. We've actually talked about this quite a lot on this podcast about how, and you just said it, designs are kind of cyclical. Things come back here and there. When are we going to start to see the cars that are like stuff we've never seen before, like really like wild? And Johnny theorizes it's when the steering wheel goes away, when cars are all driving themselves, which in my mind means that's like we're going to be dead by then. Like that's like probably 30, 50 years or so out. But are you drawing stuff, designing stuff, sketching things that looks like we would never expect to see it on a road?
What does a car without a steering wheel look like?
Well, I think that I think that's fair to say that the transition to full autonomy does have a big impact. I mean, there you really have the opportunity to think totally different about the cabin and really, seating positions, all of that, especially if you're never, ever meant to manually drive the vehicle.
Do you need a windshield?
or where does that take us as far as safety legislation, right? If the vehicle can't be crashed.
Well, this
is my operating theory. So this is great. Yeah. So this is somewhat validation, right? If
Ed needs a lot of validation.
I need a lot of validation. So if you have a car, yes, it drives itself. It's talking to other cars. It's talking to infrastructure. If it's never going to crash, first of all, the insurance companies go out of business, but that's a separate topic. Your A-pillow doesn't need to be like this thick.
Well, we could get back to Type 2 bus-like proportions where you have no front end crash. I mean, that's why we don't have those proportions on the road anymore, because you just can't. So much of vehicle design is legislated in its architectural level because of
like Ian Callum said years ago. He said the only freedom left is the rear end, and he goes, and they'll start coming up with like rear end crash,
right?
Stars.
And it's one of those things, I think. The problem with thinking that far forward is there are so many factors that would influence that because, well, is that when the first car comes out that if left to its own devices, it could never crash? That doesn't mean somebody else can't, some guy in an old pickup truck can't run into it.
Sure.
Because, there's still certain things that are going to be unavoidable. So
does
that mean we need to
defense.
ban all manually driven vehicles
Yeah.
before we can get to that point where we're not legislating safety?
And again,
That's a few years away.
But
you know?
in this country, like that'll never happen.
And
Look. I mean, I make this point. I've given a couple of talks about this, but and it gets pretty dark. But we had someone walk into a elementary school classroom and shoot 26-year-old in the face, and you can still buy AR-15.
Yeah.
You're never taking cars away from Americans.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
It's hard to imagine.
But in Norway.
Yeah,
New Zealand just banned smoking.
No, they banned tobacco. If you're born before a certain year,
Yeah,
you can't.
exactly.
You can't buy tobacco ever.
2008.
I didn't know. I haven't
if
heard
you're-
about that.
If you were born 2008 or newer, you'll never be allowed to buy tobacco. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to your original question, I still think you're because of technology, because of shift to autonomy, electrification, connected car experience, we're going to see a rapid progression of design. It's inevitable. And we're already in it, and we don't even realize. We just got through saying, man, there's so much stuff going on. If I go back to the 90s and early 2000s, it was very predictable what was coming next, and then was coming next, and what was coming next. Now it's like everybody's got this push to show the consumer that they are giving you the future.
Right.
That's what the consumer, and that didn't used to be like that. It used to be when I joined Audi, luxury meant you have to have a history, a legacy. You have to show how deep
Auto
and rich
union.
and how far you've
Auto
come.
union. Yeah.
The luxury consumer doesn't care about that.
Right.
They want the
Right.
future, and they want as much of it right now. So for design, that's a huge opportunity because we can say, okay, what's the technology? How do we express technology, take advantage of it, and show that, and let the vehicle communicate to you that it's high tech.
Can you give us an example of that? Like what is something that we might not be thinking about that communicates all that? Like what's going to define a beautiful car in the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, I mean, it's back to the topic we covered a little bit earlier, and this is why we were so obsessive of not having a grille in the front of the car, because all those big openings is telling the viewer that it's old technology.
Interesting.
Okay.
It's like when this has a bunch of buttons on the front of it, it's an
a cell
antique,
phone. Right.
It's done, right?
Right.
The big grills and all the fake
it's
vents.
like a rotary
it's like,
dial.
Oh yeah, remember when they had to have those openings to make that?
Interesting.
This car has way more horsepower than this car, and it's seamless and effortlessly fast.
Oh, fascinating.
And you have to make all that noise and all that ruckus and have all the openings.
Yeah.
That's telling. For that generation, they're like, "Oh, remember that? That's kind of cool,"
Yeah.
But it's
fascinating.
So we're going through that right now. So when we work towards, like when we came up with the Vortex system, that was all about minimizing. And
the Vortex system is the intake. It instead of having a massive grill, it's a little grill, and there's this vortex that efficiently shoots air on the radiators.
Right. It allowed us to half the size of the air opening and make it better aerodynamically, weight distribution, and of course. Cooling.
Well, hang on. But this it sounds good. It sounds awesome. I get it. I'm a car person. The general consumer, are they going to know or care? Are they going to get it? Like right now, the definition of speed are not just big old vents. I mean, look at a Formula One car. It's wings and stuff, right? It's like this accoutrement that's on the front or the back of the car. If all vehicles end up being slippery pods, or
we'll shift to another thing.
It's cyclical.
It's cyclical. You brought up the LED headlights. When the LEDs first came out, they were so expensive. You could only afford to put so many in the cars. That's why the early R8s had the very clear.
Spaced out.
If that came out on a modern car today, you guys would rip it apart, saying,
Right.
"Oh my God, the headlights look so old-fashioned."
Right.
The new one, everything's seamless now and minimized, and it's not fluttering eyelashes. It's so it's just part of, even if the consumer is not consciously aware of it.
Well, I think your analogy about the phone, like if your cell phone has buttons on it, it's like an old BlackBerry that, you saw your dad using 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You want that. And I remember, I'll never forget this, when the Model S first came out, we had a Model S, and I was just randomly, like obnoxiously running up to people at a supercharger being like, "Why'd you buy yours?"
Yeah.
And this guy was like, "I love my phone, and my wife's friend, she picked us up in one, and I sat in the back seat, and I was just staring right at that giant touchscreen. Had to have it because I love my phone." And I'm like, "You're out of your mind."
Yeah.
That's why he bought the car.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's exciting right now because the technology is moving so fast that we get to latch onto these technologies, integrate them, design them in a way that is super attractive and it's showing off. The problem is the technology is moving so fast and it goes out of date so fast, right? So then that look will date itself, and to your point, we'll be on to the next thing. If now I can make all my screens super curved and I don't have to have tablets hanging off the instrument panel, I can have freeform screens or
fold up or project or something.
All of these things are indicators to the consumer, like that's new, that's definitely old.
Right.
And if you go back to the beginning of time when cars were the automobile was simply a carriage without the horse.
Right.
Well, we're kind of in that phase right now where, electric car right now, in many cases, is simply looks like an internal combustion car that's been electrified.
Right.
Or autonomous car, which is just a normal car that's now got autonomous features. We're going to now transition where everything's much more purpose designed around those technologies.
So, do you think like the Air, for instance, is indicated that shift? And I'll go way back in time, like the Mercedes Simplex, which I think was like 1902. So it was the first car that had a radiator in the front. It had the steering column, instead of going straight up and down, it was at a 45-degree angle. Yeah. And no one really knew it, but like there was no going back.
Right.
Like there was just like cars had radiators at the front after the Simplex showed up.
That's right. Yeah.
You had, the cars got lower, the chassis got kind of underslung-ish, and you had a steering column that wasn't straight up and down. It just changed everything.
Just big changes.
Yeah.
I certainly do. I mean, if especially in the luxury sedan segment, because I generally give the German brands virtually all the credit for the modern sports luxury sedan.
Totally.
Right?
They took it over.
Yeah, so you think about kind of from the late 60s, the evolution of Mercedes-Benz, the evolution of BMW in the sports sedan, and even where Audi came in the kind of late 70s and early 80s. And you look at those silhouettes and how each generation was a progression of the same basic architectural concept: internal combustion, transmission, seating,
rear drive,
And it's like it was so easy to plot, and the DNA and the architecture of that skeleton, which is that made up of those components, is very obvious. The Lucid Air is able to really break from that, shorten the hood, longer cabin. It's clearly four-wheel drive. It's got less openings. It's a much more seamless approach to it. That's not to say those. It's just those designs were appropriate for internal combustion, and this is more akin to the electric architecture.
Well, to his point about the Simplex, and I think the point you're making, isn't the enabling technology then, like it was the radiator and maybe the angle of the steering wheel, for the electric car, it's going to be the skateboard chassis, right? It's everybody. It's been basically, and feel free to disagree, it's basically decided that batteries in the floor, low down as possible, motors as close to the wheels as possible, like either right in between if you're only a single or a dual motor, or at all four corners if you're 3 and 4 motor. Like that's it for a while until we can get batteries that are
part of the body structure,
structural, lighter, can be smaller, can be spread around, like part of the body panel. We've seen all these things. It could be eventually part of the body panel or in the frame or in the unibody versus just being kind of lined up
on the floor.
Yeah. I think one could argue that's probably what this next generation of electric cars will stick with. That's not necessarily the case with really, really low vehicles like mid-engine cars, sports cars.
Right.
You need to get that H point down lower, and having a stack of batteries below your that limits how low you can go with the seating position. So then you start thinking about, let's put the mass where
the engine was,
right? So that it's mid-engine in that sense. It's
mid-battery,
mid-pack,
mid-battery.
So I think they'll also, that exploration of where the mass in a vehicle used to live. Can we start to think about a longer hood car that's all batteries up there? Would that still equate? Does that make sense? Everybody's seen the advantages of a low center of gravity. We want to make sure all of that sits really low. That's going to bring in different structures. and suspension layout. So, I mean, I think there's still a lot that's going to happen. But for a general passenger vehicle, it does make a lot of sense.
Skateboard makes, and it works as a sedan, it works as an SUV, it works as a truck.
Sure. And the other thing to consider is efficiency. We're really focused on efficiency and how much energy we need to go.
You might say obsessed, because I've now met with Peter Rawlinson several times, and like no matter what I say, he'll like, you always miss, you missed the point. Efficiency.
So if your entire system is super efficient, and then simultaneously your energy density of your batteries is increasing.
Right.
And out in the world, you're getting more opportunities for fast charging, so you don't have to stress about that. Right. Now we can reduce the amount of batteries.
Right.
Because I don't need to go as far as that. And that means we can perhaps lay out the vehicle slightly different because we need half as many batteries. So there's a knock-on effect as the technology evolves, as the infrastructure evolves to the vehicle architecture.
That's my other operating theory, is that for EVs, the next the biggest change on the horizon will be mass reduction, will be weight. Like as soon as we can solve for the battery, the storage, the charging.
That's the problem.
Like then it opens up, because we were just talking about this with our prior guest. And it's a terrible generalization, but you can describe most consumer-grade EVs that are available as kind of driving very similar, because all the batteries are in the floor, and they have this planted kind of feeling that's unique,
and instant torque,
and they're quiet. So this low feeling, the instant torque, the instant push acceleration, and then the silence. And these are like the three fundamental mainstays of the driving experience. If you were able to dramatically reduce weight, you could change some of that. You could actually have a light-feeling EV, which I don't think anybody's actually described as a genuine, like, oh, man, this thing feels like as light as a Lotus Elise or something.
Yeah.
Right?
But that is something Peter has stressed to me, is that, he was the chief engineer at Lotus, and he's like, I want this thing to handle like a Lotus. And then, he's the CEO. I don't want to talk back that much, but it's like, it weighs 5,000 pounds, bro. Like,
it's not quite there.
Lotus,
but, I mean, I think that, certainly weight reduction is going to be a big topic, but because an electric, weight reduction is not new to the car industry, right? So it's not like there's going to be a magic bullet in the structure or the build of the car that's overnight going to change that.
Right.
It's the battery pack.
Right.
The battery technology has to evolve, or we need to use less batteries through efficiency or through charging infrastructure. That's going to make the big difference. The most likely scenario is it's all going to evolve together. We're going to push hardcore for efficiency. That's obsessive.
Right.
We're going to get an improvement in battery efficiency and battery weight, and we're going to see the infrastructure for charging. That's going to allow us to use less batteries. That'll have a knock-on effect to better efficiency. You know what I mean? It's all it's all tied together.
On each other.
I got one slightly pivot, just a pivot real quickly.
Real quick, I want to stick just with two more questions. One from you, one from you. How far ahead are you looking when you wake up in the morning? What year are you thinking?
What year are you living in?
Because it's 2022 now. What you're thinking about when?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to. On one hand, we have our next generation, our next vehicle we need to focus on.
Yeah, the
probably
Gravity.
The vehicle,
we know it's the Gravity.
The vehicle and
SUV.
platform out beyond that, which is going to spawn multiple vehicles.
Right.
So those are things that are quite tangible for the next 3 to 5 years. Right.
Okay, so 3 or 5 years.
So that's
ahead,
that's the bread and butter work that I have to do. That doesn't mean it's not advanced. We're going to make it as advanced as we can possibly do and responsibly bring it to market, right? It's what's out beyond that I still have to kind of put brain power towards as we start to think about where all the different areas of the industry going and all the different ways of mobility. I'm still waiting for my electric motorhome. Where's that?
Right.
And different kind of vehicle proportions that are not in any way represented
electric
in the marketplace.
Myers-Manx.
That could be interesting. Or you were talking about Lotus. Like, where is that composite tub with no doors and a windscreen that's got 400 electric horsepower and weighs 1,800 pounds?
Right.
Where's that? Right. Because that'll just melt the enthusiast brain, because it'll be so awesome. I'm always thinking of those types of things. Are those appropriate for Lucid? Maybe not. I don't know.
Sure.
But
you're defining the brand.
You really
still.
have to think about there is going to be a whole range of things coming. I'm super excited about the off-road scene, what Rivian's doing, the Hummer.
Oh, you should be. It's killer.
That's
awesome. It's super killer.
There's so many even the side-by-sides as those start to become electric. What's happening with the bicycles, with the motorcycles? Where are we going to go with the side-by-sides and the dune buggies? And that is so exciting because I would argue that that's just going to make it more usable and it'll be more appropriate to still go off-roading, right. Which we don't want that to go away, right?
Right.
And there's just so many opportunities. Right?
Well, let me ask you then the counterpoint to this. Then this is great, perfect segue. Are there any evolutionary dead ends that you're looking at? You're like, this is not going to happen. And I'll tell you what. I drive up here, and I pass by this billboard, and it's for the Oculus, like the latest generation of this VR headset. And I suspect you probably use some of these in your design work. Like you got to put one on, and like you're messing with the interior, the exterior. Yeah. For the consumer, I still think that ain't going to happen. Like. It's so clunky. It's such a so if you know what I'm talking about, it's a headset goggle situation, and you put two controllers in your hand, and I think you might have wireless controllers now, but at least the headset is still wired. Yeah. So you got to be like plugged into like a little computer, and then yes, you have this VR experience, but that barrier. The gear's expensive. It's clunky as hell. It looks dorky. You can't really wear it. You can't wear it on a plane currently. You look like a weirdo. It's
awful.
Like it's a dead end in terms of mass adoption. It's not going to come until there's like a microchip you can insert in this little spot in your head, or it's a contact lens or something, right?
But even remember Google Glass? Like nobody, you're a glass hole.
Great one. Yeah. Like Google, like we're going to put the glasses on. And this is going to change the world. And that went nowhere.
Yeah. Awful. It was the worst look.
Are there any evolutionary dead ends that you can see, in the future? And I pointed to VR headsets as being just way too clunky right now. But I also look back at what MotorTrend's covered for years, which is like, flying cars, they're going to come. And
where's my flying
car? And I think like the technology piece is one thing, but it's similar to like the argument with autonomous, like the regulations, like. Who's going to navigate? Who's going to control where the air traffic controller is going to be for cars if they can take off anywhere and land anywhere? Like, how's that going to work? Like, I don't see it. Or snap of the fingers, something's going to flip, and all of a sudden, we're going to be able to get there with either VR or the metaverse or self-driving or whatever. Like, anything that you're like, it's a little far out there.
I mean, I feel like. Just on a practical level, we're at this stage now where it's like we got to have more screens, we got to have bigger screens in the car. And it's like we have the opportunity to put so many screens in the car, we don't know what to do with them.
Right, that's
so often
a great
people
point.
are just like, yeah, that's great. I'm back on my phone. You know what I mean? Or I'm back on my iPad, and I feel like we're going to go through a period now of just like screen overload, and then there's going to be like a more thoughtful approach to it. It's just like with the phones. Remember, the phones got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's like, nope, we know a lot of people don't like that big a phone. And I feel like that's going to be something, and that's going to play out over the next 5 years. Long term, where do we go with information in the vehicle? That's tied directly to autonomy. When we can actually get to that level 4 stage, when can I actually shut down and do whatever I want in the car? It's so hard to know that until we really get over that threshold, which I think is a little farther out than most people expect,
Yeah. I think I was going to say, last question, when does that happen? And then we'll wrap this up.
Autonomy?
Yeah.
Gosh. If you had to guess, come on.
I'd still say it's the latter half of this decade. So we're like 25 to 30, 2025 to 2030.
Oh, so that's sooner.
That's soon.
Yeah, I still think we're going to see it. The question is, in what applications? Are we just seeing it in the early mass adoption of fleet?
Right.
Or are we going to see each individual person?
You know something we don't know. We're going to be dead by the time autonomous vehicles.
Well, I've talked to other people at Lucid, though, who have said it's 20 years. It's 2 decades out.
Yeah.
It's 2040.
I don't know. A lot of people are working on it, but it's hard to say. I mean, we're going to see it we already see it in these early fleet applications.
Sure.
Right? That's going to be the telltale to see how that pans out. But if I put another 5, 6, 7 years onto that technology evolution, a lot's going to transpire in that time with this many people focusing on it. Where I'm doubtful is just that mass adoption of a level 4. There's some big tech companies working on this and taking it very serious. Let's see what happens. I still believe strongly that getting in a car and driving it yourself is going to be the predominant thing we're doing for the next 10 years, at least probably 15 years.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay.
All right. Well, Derek Jenkins, it's been a pleasure. He is the Senior Vice President of Design and Brand at Lucid Motors. This has been awesome and way too short. I think another guest we got to bring back. But thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. That was fun.